Emma sat quietly in the lawyer's office, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The air felt heavy, almost too thick to breathe. Beside her sat her mother, Linda, calm and distant as always, and her older brother, Ryan, who kept glancing at her with a strange mix of pity and nervousness. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and began reading the will. His voice was steady and clear. According to the last will and testament of Mr. Henry Collins. He paused for a moment, then continued. All assets, including the family house, bank savings, and company shares, are to be given to Ryan Collins. Emma blinked, thinking she must have misheard him. But then the lawyer's next words confirmed it. Miss Emma Collins is not listed as a beneficiary. The room fell completely silent. The ticking clock on the wall was the only sound. Emma's throat tightened. She looked at her mother, searching for an explanation. Linda kept her eyes on the table, refusing to meet her gaze. Mom, Emma's voice trembled. Why? Linda finally looked up, her face cold and unreadable. You made your choices, Emma, she said softly but firmly. You can't turn your back on family and expect to be rewarded. The words hit Emma like a slap. Choices? What choices? She had only chosen to live her life differently, to follow her heart, not her mother's rules. Ryan shifted in his seat, looking uncomfortable. I didn't know about this, he said, reaching out to touch her hand. But his voice sounded rehearsed, almost guilty, like he had practiced this moment in his head. Emma pulled her hand away. Of course you didn't, she said quietly, though deep down, she wasn't sure she believed it. The lawyer cleared his throat, breaking the tension. There's one more thing. He reached into his briefcase and brought out a small, sealed envelope. Your grandfather left this for you, Miss Collins. He said it was for when this day came. Emma stared at the envelope. Her heart thudded in her chest. What did he mean by this day? She took it with trembling fingers. Thank you, she whispered, standing up before anyone could see the tears forming in her eyes. She turned and walked out of the office, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Outside, the cold air hit her face, but it couldn't numb the sting in her heart. She clutched the envelope tightly in her hand, her eyes burning. Everything she had believed about her family, about love, loyalty, and fairness, suddenly felt like a lie. She looked down at the envelope again. Her name was written in her grandfather's neat handwriting. It felt warm against her palm, almost alive, as if it carried something powerful inside it. Emma didn't know what was in the letter, but she knew one thing for sure. Whatever it was, it held the truth. And the truth was waiting to be set free. Henry built the family's wealth through hard work and determination. He started from nothing, just a small workshop at the edge of town. But through years of effort, he turned it into a successful business. Everyone respected him for his honesty and kindness. He believed in family and fairness, and in doing the right thing, even when it was hard. But after Henry's death, everything changed. Linda, his daughter and Emma's mother, took control of the family business and the estate. She was smart and strong-willed, but also proud and controlling. Under her care, the warmth in the family began to fade. What once felt like love and unity became cold and distant. Growing up, Emma had always felt like she didn't belong. Her mother was strict, always pushing her to be perfect. The best grades, the best manners, the best image. Ryan, on the other hand, could do no wrong. He was the golden child, the one Linda believed would carry on the family name. Whenever Emma made a mistake or spoke her mind, Linda would sigh and say, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" But Grandpa Henry was different. He saw Emma's heart. When she was sad, he would take her to his workshop, where the smell of wood and oil filled the air. He'd tell her stories about how he built everything from scratch, teaching her that real success wasn't about money. It was about integrity and kindness. Never let anyone make you feel small for caring, he would say, patting her hand. The world needs more hearts like yours. Those words stayed with Emma, even after he was gone. When she grew older, Emma chose to study social work. She wanted to help people, especially children from broken homes. But her mother saw it as a disappointment. You have our name, our resources, Linda would say. And you choose to work for pennies helping strangers? Emma would try to explain that it wasn't about money, but Linda never listened. Their relationship grew colder with every argument. Then came another loss. Emma's father passed away suddenly. He had always been the quiet one, the bridge between mother and daughter. Without him, everything fell apart. Linda buried herself in work and pride. Emma stopped visiting home. The calls became fewer until they stopped completely. Years passed. Emma built a small life for herself. She rented a tiny apartment in the city, with peeling paint and thin walls, but it was hers. She worked long hours at a community center, helping families in need. Sometimes she couldn't even pay her bills on time, but she never complained. She believed she was living with purpose, even if it meant living without comfort. Still, there were nights when loneliness crept in. She would think about her grandfather, his laughter, his wisdom, his hugs that made her feel safe. Sometimes she wondered what he would think of how things turned out. And then came the day of the will reading, the day everything shattered. Now, sitting alone in her apartment, Emma stared at the sealed envelope the lawyer had given her. Her name was written in her grandfather's neat handwriting. She turned it over and over in her hands. What could it be? Why did he say it was for when this day came? Days passed. Each time she looked at the envelope, her chest tightened. She was afraid of what it might reveal, afraid it would make the pain even worse. But the curiosity, the need for answers, kept eating at her. Finally, one quiet evening, she sat down at her small kitchen table. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the fridge. She took a deep breath and tore the envelope open. Inside was a folded letter and a small, old-fashioned key. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the paper. It was her grandfather's handwriting, steady and strong, just like she remembered. The first line made her heart race. "If you're reading this," it began, "it means the truth has been buried long enough." Emma stared at the words, feeling her pulse quicken. The truth? What truth? She read the next few lines, her eyes filling with tears. Whatever her grandfather was about to reveal, she knew one thing. It would change everything she thought she knew about her family. The key sat on the table, glinting under the light, silent but powerful. And as Emma held it in her hand, a new feeling began to grow inside her. Not fear this time, but determination. She didn't know where this truth would lead her, but she was ready to find out. The letter revealed something Emma could hardly believe. Her grandfather, Henry, had suspected that her mother, Linda, forged some parts of his estate documents before he died. Emma froze, staring at the page. The words seemed to blur as her heart pounded in her chest. Grandpa? Forged documents? By her own mother? It didn't make sense. She read the next lines carefully. Henry had written, "If you are reading this, Emma, it means I was right to trust you. I fear your mother may have changed parts of my will. I tried to stop her, but my health failed too soon. I left the truth where she will never look, in my old workshop." He went on to describe a small storage facility in town where he used to keep his tools and records. At the end of the letter, he added, "The key I left you will help you find what was meant to be yours. Follow it, and you will know the truth." Emma set the letter down, her hands trembling. She stared at the old key lying on the table. It was small, heavy, and rusted, but it seemed to carry the weight of everything she had ever questioned about her family. She leaned back in her chair, her mind spinning. Could it really be true? Could her own mother have stolen from her? And from her grandfather's dying wishes? Part of her wanted to forget it all, to throw the letter away and move on. She was tired of the pain, the anger, the feeling of being unwanted. Maybe knowing the truth would only make things worse. But another part of her, the part that had always stood up for what was right, refused to stay silent. She could almost hear her grandfather's voice again. Truth doesn't need permission to stand. That night, Emma barely slept. By morning, her decision was made. She packed her bag, took the letter and the key, and drove across town to the old workshop. The building stood at the edge of a quiet street, surrounded by tall grass and fading paint. The sign that once said Henry's Repairs was cracked and weathered. Emma took a deep breath and stepped inside. The air smelled of dust and old memories. Sunlight streamed through small, dirty windows, falling on shelves of forgotten tools and stacks of boxes. She walked slowly, running her fingers along the old workbench where she had once sat as a child, watching her grandfather fix clocks and radios. "Where would you hide the truth, Grandpa?" she whispered. She began searching through drawers, boxes, and cabinets. Most of what she found were old receipts, photographs, and notebooks filled with sketches. Then, behind a stack of old ledgers, she saw a small metal safe. Her heart skipped a beat. She knelt in front of it, pulled the key from her pocket, and slid it into the lock. It turned with a soft click. Inside were several envelopes, a few documents, and a sealed brown folder labeled Estate, Original. Emma's hands shook as she opened it. There, in her grandfather's handwriting, were the original property papers, and another will. A second will. She unfolded it carefully, her breath catching as she read the words. I, Henry Collins, declare that my estate be divided equally between my grandchildren, Ryan Collins and Emma Collins. Her name. It was right there, written, signed, witnessed, and dated. Tears filled her eyes as realization washed over her. Her grandfather had wanted her to have half of everything. He had trusted her. He had believed in her. But somehow, that will had been hidden, replaced, or destroyed. She sank onto the dusty floor, the papers clutched in her hands. A mix of emotions surged through her. Shock, disbelief, anger, but also something new. Purpose. Her mother hadn't just cut her out of the will. She had betrayed her own father's final wishes. Emma sat there for a long time, staring at the documents. The woman she had spent her whole life trying to please had stolen from her, lied to her, and dishonored the man who had loved them both. But not anymore. As she wiped her tears, her expression hardened. She gathered the papers, placed them carefully in her bag, and looked around the workshop one last time. This isn't just about money, she whispered to herself. It's about the truth. And as she locked the door behind her, Emma knew her life was about to change forever. Emma confronted Ryan the next morning, her hands shaking as she held the folder of papers she had found in the workshop. He opened the door to his office, looking surprised to see her there. Ryan, we need to talk, she said, her voice trembling but firm. He frowned. Emma, what's going on? She dropped the folder on his desk. It's Grandpa's real will. The one Mom hid from everyone. Ryan's eyes widened as he opened the folder and scanned the papers. What are you talking about? Don't act like you don't know, Emma snapped. He left half of everything to me. The house, the savings, the company. Everything. But Mom forged a new one. She made sure I got nothing. Ryan looked pale. He sat down slowly, still reading the documents. I didn't know she did that, he said quietly. I knew something wasn't right. The will was updated so suddenly after Grandpa's health went bad. But Mom said it was just legal housekeeping. Legal housekeeping? Emma repeated bitterly. Ryan, she stole my future, and she betrayed Grandpa's last wishes. He rubbed his forehead, looking torn. Emma, please calm down. We can talk to her, figure this out. No, Emma interrupted sharply. I already tried talking to her my whole life. It's time she faces the truth. That evening, Emma went to their mother's house. Linda was in the living room, sipping tea and pretending not to be surprised when Emma stormed in. I found the real will, Emma said, her voice shaking with anger. You forged Grandpa's documents, didn't you? Linda set her cup down slowly and sighed. Oh, Emma, you don't understand. Your grandfather was not well at the end. He was confused. He didn't know what he was signing. That's a lie, Emma snapped. He was more clear-headed than you ever gave him credit for. Linda's expression hardened. Watch your tone. Everything I've done has been for this family. Ryan deserved the company. You walked away from us years ago. You chose your own path. Emma felt tears sting her eyes. You mean I chose not to live under your control? That's what this is really about, isn't it? You couldn't stand that I wanted something different. Different. Linda stood up, her voice rising. You threw away your future for a job that barely pays your rent. You embarrassed this family. And now you come crawling back, because you want money. Emma shook her head slowly. I don't want your money. I want the truth. Ryan, who had followed Emma there, tried to calm them both. Please stop. We can't do this here. But neither woman listened. Years of pain spilled out like floodwater. Emma accused her mother of never loving her, of always making her feel like a mistake. Linda accused Emma of being ungrateful and selfish. By the end, Emma was shaking. You betrayed Grandpa, she whispered, voice breaking. And you betrayed me. She turned and left before the tears fell. Over the next few days, word spread fast. Emma filed a legal motion to contest the will. Friends, cousins, even old neighbors started choosing sides. Some believed Emma. Others whispered that she was making up stories because she wanted money. One afternoon, Emma sat alone in her car outside the courthouse, crying quietly. She remembered her grandfather's words. Truth doesn't need permission to stand. She repeated them over and over until her breathing slowed. Still, doubt crept in. The fight was exhausting. Linda's lawyer had already started calling her unstable, saying she was emotionally unfit and desperate for attention. They even hinted that she had mental health struggles. The lies made Emma's stomach turn. For a moment, she thought about giving up. Maybe it wasn't worth it. Maybe she should just let it go. That night, she sat on her couch, staring at the documents spread out in front of her. The walls felt smaller, the silence heavier. She whispered to herself, maybe Mom was right. Maybe I should have just stayed quiet. Just then, there was a knock on her door. She wiped her eyes and opened it to find Ryan standing there, holding a small black flash drive. His face looked tired, but there was a spark of something in his eyes, guilt mixed with determination. Emma, he said quietly, I found this. It was in Grandpa's old computer. You need to hear what's on it. She frowned, confused. What is it? Ryan looked down, then met her eyes. Proof, he said. Proof that Mom really did it. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She let him in, and they sat at her laptop. As Ryan plugged in the flash drive, Emma felt both terrified and hopeful. The screen flickered, and a file appeared titled Henry Audio Logs. Ryan looked at her and said softly, he recorded everything. Emma's eyes widened. For the first time in weeks, she felt the faintest spark of hope, the kind that burns quietly but refuses to die. The truth was finally within reach. In court, Linda's legal team stood confidently before the judge. Her lawyer, a tall man in a dark suit, spoke with authority. Your Honor, this is the valid and final will of Mr. Henry Collins. It was properly signed and witnessed. Any claims made by Miss Emma Collins are based on false assumptions and emotional distress. Emma sat quietly beside her lawyer, her heart pounding but her face calm. She had spent sleepless nights preparing for this moment. Across the room, her mother avoided her eyes, sitting straight and cold, as if the outcome was already decided. The lawyer continued, showing the judge copies of the current will, the one that gave everything to Ryan. Mr. Collins trusted his daughter, Mrs. Linda Collins, to handle his affairs. There is no evidence of wrongdoing. Emma's lawyer stood. Your Honor, we believe there is. We have new evidence. Proof that the original will was tampered with. The judge raised an eyebrow. Proceed. Emma glanced at Ryan, who gave her a small nod. He stood up slowly, holding a flash drive. Your Honor, he said, his voice a little shaky. We found these audio files on our grandfather's old workshop computer. They were recorded a few days before his death. The courtroom grew quiet as the judge allowed the files to be played. Ryan inserted the flash drive into a laptop, and Henry's familiar voice filled the room. Older, weaker, but clear. Linda keeps asking me to sign new papers, Henry's voice said. She says it's just to simplify things, but I know what she's doing. She wants control of everything. I love her, but this isn't right. I told her Emma deserves her share. She's got a good heart, but Linda won't listen. The courtroom gasped. Emma covered her mouth, tears welling up in her eyes. Another recording played. Henry sounded tired, coughing between words. If something happens to me, and the truth doesn't come out, I trust Emma will find it. I left the real papers where she'll know to look. The sound of the judge's gavel echoed through the silent room. Linda sat frozen, her hands trembling. Her lawyer tried to speak, but she raised a hand to stop him. Her face turned pale, then red with anger and shame. Mom, Ryan whispered, turning to her. Tell them it's not true. But Linda said nothing. Her lips trembled, and for the first time, she looked truly broken. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, I only wanted to protect what I built. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Emma felt a sharp pain in her chest. For years she had dreamed of hearing her mother admit the truth, but now that it was happening, it didn't feel like victory. It just hurt. The judge cleared his throat. Mrs. Linda Collins, the recordings are clear evidence that the will currently presented is invalid. It appears the original will was intentionally replaced. Therefore, this court rules that the original will, dividing the estate equally between Emma Collins and Ryan Collins, is to be restored immediately. The sound of the gavel striking the bench marked the end of the fight. There was a wave of murmurs in the courtroom. Some people looked shocked, others relieved. Ryan sat quietly, tears in his eyes. Emma stared ahead, unable to move. The judge stood and left. Linda stayed seated, staring at the floor. Her once proud posture was gone. The weight of guilt and shame seemed to crush her. Emma walked toward her mother slowly. For a moment neither spoke. Linda finally looked up, her face streaked with tears. "You won," she whispered bitterly. Emma shook her head. "No, Mom. I didn't win." Her voice was calm, but her eyes were full of sadness. "You didn't lose to me. You lost to the truth." Linda's lips trembled, but she said nothing. Emma turned and walked away, her heels echoing in the silent courtroom. Outside, the sun was shining, but the air felt heavy. Ryan joined her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I should have spoken up sooner." Emma gave him a small smile. "You did the right thing in the end, Ryan. That's what matters." As they walked down the courthouse steps, Emma looked up at the sky. She didn't feel joy or triumph, just peace. For years, the truth had been buried under lies and pride. But now it had finally come to light. And though it hurt, it also healed something deep inside her. Her grandfather's words echoed softly in her mind. Truth doesn't need permission to stand. And this time it truly stood tall. Emma used her inheritance not for luxury or comfort, but for something that mattered deeply to her. She opened a small foundation in her grandfather's name, the Henry Collins Foundation, to help struggling families and children find hope again. It was her way of honoring him, of continuing the kindness and honesty he had always shown her. The office was simple, with plain furniture and photos of Henry on the walls. Every time Emma walked in, she felt his presence, as if he was smiling proudly from above. People in the community soon began to hear about her work. Families who had lost everything found support. Children who had no place to go found care and love. One evening, as Emma finished her paperwork, Ryan stopped by. He stood at the doorway, looking nervous. "Can I come in?" he asked softly. "Of course," Emma said with a small smile. He sat across from her, his eyes filled with guilt. "I wanted to say thank you, and I'm sorry. I should have stood by you sooner. I saw things that didn't feel right, but I stayed quiet because I didn't want to lose Mom." Emma sighed. "I understand, Ryan. We both grew up under her shadow. It wasn't easy." He looked down. "She's not doing well. She sold the house. She said she needed to leave town for a while." Emma nodded slowly. "I know. She needs time, and maybe distance. Some mistakes take a lifetime to face." Ryan looked at her carefully. "Do you hate her?" Emma thought for a moment, then shook her head. "No. I don't hate her. I just can't forget what she did. But I've learned something. Forgiveness doesn't mean letting someone hurt you again. It means freeing yourself from the pain." Ryan smiled faintly. "You sound like Grandpa." Emma's eyes softened. "Maybe I finally understand him now." They sat in silence for a while, both of them feeling a strange calm. For the first time in years, they were no longer divided by secrets or lies. They were brother and sister again. A few days later, Emma drove to the old cemetery where her grandfather was buried. The air was cool and quiet, and the sound of birds filled the sky. She knelt beside his grave, brushing off a few fallen leaves. In her hands, she held the letter he had written, the one that had started everything. She placed it gently into the soil beside his name. Her voice was soft but steady as she whispered, "You were right, Grandpa." Truth stood. For a long moment, she stayed there, letting the peace of the place wash over her. She felt no anger, no sadness, only gratitude. As she stood to leave, the wind brushed through the trees, and a small smile touched her lips. For the first time in a very long while, Emma felt light, as if a great weight had finally lifted from her heart. She walked back toward her car, the evening sun warm on her face. Life was not perfect, but it was honest, and that was enough. Her grandfather's lesson echoed softly in her mind. Everything broken can work again, if you care enough to repair it. And Emma knew she was living proof of that truth. "It wasn't the money I wanted," Emma said softly. "It was the truth. Because sometimes, what's written in ink fades, but what's written in the heart doesn't." Her voice echoed gently over scenes of her new life. Children laughing in the foundation's small playground, families smiling with relief, and Emma watching quietly, her eyes full of peace. As she walked through the garden outside the center, the early morning sun began to rise. Its light painted the sky in soft gold and pink, wrapping the world in warmth and hope. She stopped for a moment, breathing in deeply, her heart calm. A memory flashed in her mind. Grandpa Henry's workshop. She was a little girl again, sitting on a wooden stool, watching him fix an old pocket watch. "See this, Emma?" he had said, holding up the tiny gears between his fingers. "Everything broken can work again, if you care enough to repair it." She remembered how he smiled at her, his eyes full of love and wisdom. "And that goes for people too," he added. The memory faded, but the warmth of his words stayed with her. Emma smiled through tears, whispering, "You were right, Grandpa." She began to walk again, the sunlight glowing on her face. The pain, the anger, the years of doubt, they were still part of her story, but they no longer controlled her. Now she carried only strength, truth, and peace. As she walked toward the rising sun, her steps were light, her heart open. The world ahead felt new, like the beginning of something beautiful. Because for Emma, it was never just about what she lost. It was about what she found, herself, her voice, and the courage to stand for what was right. And in that quiet morning light, her story finally felt complete. Ibestias. Two Hearts, thank you so much for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, drop a comment, and hit that subscribe button for more amazing stories. See you in the next one. Bye. Waving Hand Sparkles.